welcome back to the Down Below, where I'll be recapping and reviewing episode 6 of Silo. For those of you who haven't seen episode 6 yet, well, it's a strong one and you'll really enjoy it. But I am going to be discussing some key plot details, so this is your spoiler warning. Speaking of warnings, don't miss out on our brand new project which we're launching called the Horror Exchange, links down below. Well, I've been saying it for a few weeks now that we were due a stronger episode after a couple of filler installments, but I'm pleased to say that there's been quite a sharp upturn this week. This episode kicks off with the first of a few flashbacks between George and Juliet, and funnily enough, I'd say these flashbacks were probably the weakest part of the episode overall. I'm not entirely convinced about the on-screen chemistry that these two have. It does appear to be a little bit janky at times, and I don't get the feeling that they both have this authentic relationship, and I couldn't quite put my finger on exactly why, but I'll definitely pick this back up later in the review. We begin with Juliet and Billings searching the quarters of recently deceased Trumbull, who was responsible for the deaths of Johns and Marnes, and Billings finds the relic, which looks a little bit like a sweet dispenser, in his place, but again, we'll stick a pin in this for later. It's interesting to see how temporary Mayor Bernard is conducting damage control in the silo. To divert attention away from the recent murders, one of the signs states forgiveness holiday. In light of recent incidents and in the spirit of goodwill, community and commerce, citizens are encouraged to let go of past grievances, to travel beyond familiar levels to see old friends, to give gifts and spend credits in the marketplace where crafts of all types can be acquired. It's only on screen for a few seconds as Juliet walks past it, and I had to pause to read the sign in full, but it's little things like this which I feel the series gets absolutely spot on. These small props continue to make this oversized container feel like a living, breathing colony. And additionally, this is supported by the director's choice of transitional shots. For example, Billings and Juliet are travelling to another part of the silo, but the atmosphere is captured perfectly as the camera pans across the hustle and bustle of a day in the life, surrounded by the dingy infrastructure. It's just brilliant. Because everything has to run through judicial in the silo, Billings and Juliet go to judicial so they can request a formal investigation into the relics, and we get a proper look inside the department for the first time. I mean, look at Judge Meadows, man. Absolute wardrobe of a specimen. But she states a few times that she isn't very well. Now, this is quite subtle and it isn't dwelled on too much during the scene, but nothing's put in a shot by accident, so I do wonder what this was alluding to. As an early prediction, maybe Sims has spiked a drink or something to poison her so he can take full control of judicial decisions. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. Sims grants access so that Juliet can open an investigation into the relics, but states that she has to take Billings with her. Following this, we get a really cool scene where Sims is in his private quarters with the door behind him, and the shelves are just filled with red bags with hazard symbols on them. In my opinion, I think he's got a stash full of relics in here. What I really like about the show is that it's starting to slowly peel back the layers of Sims's character, and as an audience, we're starting to see what kind of cards he's actually holding. As previously mentioned about the transitional shots used, well, this was sublimely executed on several occasions as a way to maneuver between Juliet's present and past timelines. It was so smooth, man, and it ties in with something I've said repeatedly throughout the show. The viewing experience is just majestic. They've clearly got a massive budget with it being an Apple original, and the quality of both set and post-production are repeatedly displayed. Coming back to my earlier point about Juliet and George being a bit janky in their interactions, well, Juliet and Billings visit Regina George's house, who reveals she was a former lover of George, and it's alluded to that he was a serial cheater. I mean, I was definitely caught off guard by this, and definitely didn't have this down in my predictions, but I guess that plays nicely into the abrasive conversations between Juliet and George in her flashbacks. I found them to be a bit cringe, in all honesty, and it turns out that my feelings were justified in the end. Regina goes on to state that George used her to get the relics so that they looked legitimate on paper, which suggests that George was a bit of a player and he used people to get what he wanted. He then left to go down deep in search of someone else to help him with his big decisions. Juliet interjects quite aggressively at this point, clearly disgruntled with the admission that George wasn't the person that she thought he was, and asks if their relationship was sanctioned. The pendulum well and truly swung in the opposite direction during this scene, and it'll be intriguing to see if Juliet's motivations to uncover the secrets of the silo are still there. During the final quarter of the episode, it's revealed by Sims that in an interview with a confidential informant, a search was conducted of George's place before he died, that no relics were found in his apartment, but last night, George's relic was found in Trumbull's apartment, which Juliet did a search of. Juliet flat out lies here, saying that during the search of the apartment, that was the first time that she ever saw the relic. Juliet planted this so that Billings would find it, and we get a brilliant scene where Billings demands honesty, to which Juliet explodes and says that Billings is hiding the syndrome despite being someone who lives his life by the pact, and that his hands shake constantly when under pressure. Now, this raised several questions for myself. What is the syndrome? Is it Parkinson's? Is he hiding it on his medical records? Because it states in the scene that you can't be part of law enforcement if you declare this. Billings then returns home and he asks his wife if there's any signs of the syndrome in his daughter, potentially stating that this disease that he has is hereditary. But he can't even undo his laces. And he then states to his wife that he's thankful for her and his daughter and that he can't imagine life in the silo if he was all by himself. This is just another powerful scene, man. I'm looking forward to uncovering what this syndrome is and what the silo's diagnosis is compared to what we know in our reality. And just like that, I care about Billings. Brilliant job. In the penultimate scene, Juliet goes to Regina's house again and accuses her for being the one who told Judicial about the hard drive relic and is the reason George is dead. Now, this is the crescendo, in my opinion, of the episode, and it gets really dark really quick. Regina says that she isn't at fault for George's death and states, "The man who knows everything comes at night and Judicial ask the easy questions during the day." I quote, "They know how to get to you. They know what you fear." In order for George to get the hard drive from Regina, he traded her for a relic which was passed down through the generations of his family. Juliet takes this relic from Regina back to her living quarters, and it turns out to be a travel guide for amazing adventures in Georgia. This just completely blows the lid off everything. It includes all the details that you'd expect from a travel guide, such as national forests, whitewater rafting, dolphins, seashells in the sand, beaches, the sea, sunsets. This will tie in really nicely with the camcorder when Walks gets that working, and I can only imagine the inner turmoil that Juliet's going through at this point, trying to understand these abstract concepts. Her facial expressions tell the full story here. It's a really well acted scene from Rebecca Ferguson. And for the final scene, well, I've been waiting for something like this to happen. The camera pans out and all the silo residents are on monitors being observed by two men. So that's my recap and review of this episode. I'm genuinely excited for next week's episode now, and it's a nice feeling to have at this stage in a series. Now, we are at a crossroads at this point. I've seen this happen many times before in both series and films, where characters are actually subjects that are being monitored. My immediate examples that come to mind for this are the Maze Runner series and the Cube trilogy. So it's not an entirely new concept, but hopefully we get more of a unique take on it. It's also cool to now get some geographical details on the location of the silo. My best guess is something happened to Georgia and the population moved underground for some reason, but we'll just have to be patient and wait and see for more details on that. But why don't you let me know down below in the comments your opinions and thoughts on episode 6, and while you're commenting, please give us a subscribe as we're so close to 35,000 subscribers. As always, I've been your host Hugh from Unleash the Ghouls. Don't forget to subscribe to the Horror Exchange in the description, and I'll see you next week down below for episode 7's review of The Silo.